capitalism, if you work really hard, or you may just have a brilliant idea, you can rise. That's the great thing about capitalism. You can dream and make it happen. The best way to destroy the capitalist system was to debauch the currency. The destruction of currency was the main component of the Bolshevik strategy. Totalitarianism, you can't protect your family. Free markets work well for the ambitious person. Restoring men and history. Now, you've taken your time and you've built a corporation up, a small business that you've developed from one cigar shop into 10 cigar shops or 10, 20 cigar shops or something else. Anyway, you've built a business. You've hired a man to come in. You've now got 20 stores. And you give him certain responsibilities and you authorize him and give him certain powers to do certain things with your business. And you have these managers underneath, but you say, don't interfere with the managers in these states of our businesses in these states because we need them to be motivated and responsible and drive their store business. And they're very independent. We want them to be independent. But you can do this, this, and this. Instead, the man creates this incredible employee pension plan and gets in areas he wasn't authorized to do and starts spending way more money than he was authorized to spend. You're making a lot of money, but he starts spending more than your company is actually taking in, and you're actually making millions and millions of dollars. And you should be well within the black. But because of this one man that you brought in, who's doing things you didn't authorize him to do, you're now losing money year after year. He says he'll fix it. One more chance. Promise I fix it, boss. I fix it. But he doesn't. So you fire him, of course, right? If you could hit the subscribe button and help us build better, stronger men, we would appreciate it. Because he's going beyond what you authorized him to do. You gave him a certain set of powers and he hasn't done it. And he's spending way more than he's authorized to spend in areas that he didn't have any power in. So you eliminate him, you get rid of him. If you were going to run a business, how would you do it? If you were going to run the United States, what's one way you could do it? And there are many ways that are all working at once today in order to run the United States. And why is this important to you men? Well, if you want to make money, you want to build businesses, it's important that you have a free market. And it's important that the government isn't acting unconstitutionally and getting in your way to support you and your family and build your business in the manner that you need to build it, correct? Lenin gave an interview, and I pulled it from this article for you gentlemen today. And this came out April 20th, 2023. Both American political parties have adopted Lenin's strategy for the destruction of capitalism. On April 22nd, 1919, on his 50th birthday, Lenin gave an interview to London's Daily Chronicle and made stunning revelations about the Bolshevik struggle to destroy capitalism. The next day, the interview was published in the New York Times, makes sense, as Talk with Bolshevist Head. Quote, experience has taught us that it is impossible to root out the evils of capitalism merely by confiscation and expropriation. For however ruthlessly such measures may be applied, astute speculators and obstinate survivors of the capitalist classes will always manage to evade them and continue to corrupt the life of the community. Now, he's saying it's going to corrupt the life of the community, but what does it really mean? It means that ingenious businessmen like Charles or someone else, John, will find a way to make it work because they're hardworking men and they're creative, right? So creative men under capitalism will do well, and they might stay and work 80 hours a week. They might spend less time with their family and to build a business, or they might balance it. Either way, they're sacrificing to build a business. This Lenin doesn't want the Charleses to be able to rise. If you work hard, it won't matter. So in capitalism, if you work really hard, or you just have a magnificent idea, you may not even have to work hard. You may just have a brilliant idea. You can rise. That's the great thing about capitalism. You can dream and make it happen as long as there's not too many regulations getting in your way and too big of a government. And the government isn't picking the winners and losers. And you're not under communism or socialism, right? And it's not redistributing all the wealth so that you can keep building more stores and move forward. If the government's not taking too much, you can invest in the next store. If the taxes are too high, you can't do that. Let's go on. To accomplish this, Lenin declared, debauch, and here's the point. Here's why I wanted to bring this up, because there's a lot of talk about currency right now, right? Debauch the currency to overturn what? What's he say? The basis of society. The destruction of currency was the main component of the Bolshevik strategy. During the interview, Lenin further elaborated on the implementation of his strategy at length. Hundreds of thousands of ruble notes are being issued daily by our treasury. Now, notice who's doing it. The government, the treasury, is doing it. This is done not in order to fill the coffers of the state with practically worthless paper, but with the deliberate intention of destroying the value of money as a means of payment. Hard to trade with Charles and John and everybody if money doesn't mean anything, if there's no value to it. Government gets more control, though, right? Simplest way to exterminate the very spirit of capitalism is therefore to flood the country with notes of a high face value without financial guarantees of any sort. The great illusion of the value and power of money on which the capitalist state is based will have been definitely destroyed. He goes on to say. Now, this man here writing this article talks about also this John Maynard Keynes, who, of course, was the famous economist. And he said this in his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, published in 1919. Lenin is said to have declared that the best way to destroy the capitalist system was to debauch the currency by a continuing process of inflation. Now, notice the inflation we've had. This is why I'm bringing this up to today, as well as other points. Control, digital currency. All these things are being talked about right now, and we need to be careful and stand against digital currency. By this method, they will not only confiscate, but they confiscate arbitrarily. That makes it difficult to do business, right? You don't know when it's coming. Lenin was certainly right. There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than debauch the currency. The process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction and does it in a manner that not one man in a million is able to diagnose. So he goes on to say, and he makes this point, how did this realization at the heart of the Bolshevik Revolution, becoming the driving force in the assault, and this is why we're reading, on the American enterprise system. So you have free market, you have mixed economy. America right now is a mixed economy. We have some of both, right? And we seem to be moving more and more toward where. So he talks about there being three critical points. First, the Democratic Party made an epochal ideological shift toward egalitarianism. Yeah, that's one thing, but we can talk about control power, right? There's a lot of powerful people who want more control over your life, and they showed it the last 3 years, and they want more power. The establishment, the Uniparty. He says, second, the Republican Party opted for the most part to ignore the ideological challenge. Well, the Republicans spent money too, on up. If you look at for about 215 years, we did okay. Right up to, we didn't have much debt to the Civil War. In the Civil War, the spending started to go up, and you have these things that happen, right? You have the Civil War, and you have the Fed. You have the Social Security Act. You have LBJ, a Democrat, doing the Medicare Act. You had FDR doing the Social Security Act. So you're unconstitutionally, by the way. Here's the problem. It's unconstitutional. Remember the man at the beginning of the story with his business and stores? That's the federal government doing the same thing to the states, taking their power. States gave the federal government a little bit of power. They act unconstitutionally, and now look at the spending they're doing. Here's the point. Look at the spending of both Republicans and Democrats in the Uniparty and the establishment right now. They just spent $1.7 trillion in December when you were suffering for butter, eggs, gasoline prices, driving your cost up. That's a tax, but they don't pass an official tax act. They just tax you. Third, he goes on to say the American voters were, well, he's not too positive here, dumb enough to elect untutored graduates of American universities that are uninformed and poorly read. Few of them have even earned notoriety for inconceivable stupidity. Some of them, aware of self-worthlessness, adopted Marxism and can hardly contain their awe and envy at the American enterprise in question. Now he goes on to talk about the gold standard was abandoned, so that's another monument. So after LBJ, you had Medicare, which got us into more spending. Then Nixon, a Republican, took us off. You can see how it's both parties. The Republicans were for the income tax and the Fed. So you can see, where does this go? Freedom, right? And fictions are supposed to, he goes on to say, to condition the masses to repel reason and accept beliefs that are contrary to common sense and life experience. We know that in real life, if you work really hard or you have a great idea, you should be rewarded for that. That's free market. The free market should reward the people with good ideas that execute them well, and they do well. The larger the government and the more taxes and the more regulations, the more that takes from the ambitious person or just the brilliant idea person that wants to move forward. So we don't want to be doing that. And he talks about military spending. There's another article I read which says, the entitlements are the real problem. So we've got entitlements, and so the owner of that business that brought in the person, the guy wanted to go to war with other companies, and he wanted to spend money on creating a pension plan for the employees and all these other things that he wasn't authorized to do. So that's the federal government doing things at the federal level they weren't authorized to do. Unconstitutional. So now, since, and I've got this chart here, let's read it. Let's finish this first. Since the 70s, the national debt has risen from billions to an astonishing 32 trillion. So think about that. Since around the 70s, the debt has risen from billions, I think about 400 billion, 398 billion, to 32 trillion. And we'll go through maybe some of that. I've got a chart on how the debt went up. And what's important is debt to GDP, right? It's not good at all right now. So really no reason for taxes, right? They spend more than they. So anyway, this is the Russian experience offers a valuable lesson. Who would want to do it? Who would want to do it, by the way? Offers a valuable lesson for those who ignorantly, he says, this is him talking, print money or have a dream of destroying capitalism. This is his story. What began in 1919 as bragging about the destruction of capitalism with considerable aplomb, just in 2 years turned into an unmitigated disaster. The destruction of currency led to hyperinflation and the complete collapse of the Russian economy. In 1921, Lenin, to foster the economy, had to bring back capitalism to bail Bolshevism out. He enacted the so-called NEP, New Economic Policy, that reinstated private ownership of land and means of production. By 1928, the Russian economy recovered. This time, Bolsheviks used taxation, regulation, forced collectivization, and mass murder to end capitalism. To strengthen the ruble and fill the coffers of the state, the Bolshevik government confiscated private citizens, now this is scary, gold, diamonds, and other valuables. So think the reason we're reading this, think what a totalitarian government could do. Or think what a government that has digital currency can do. The excess of currency without financial guarantees of any sort will eventually bring down America's pride, crush the economy, and dethrone the American dollar as the world's currency, and spur another Great Depression, he says. So listen, this is Alexander G. Markovsky. Here's the point to this. You saw the man in the story in the beginning. The guy hired the man to run his company. The guy was doing a bad job. He was acting out of his authority, in other words, unconstitutionally. So why would you ever reward the federal government, the senators and the congressmen, the Treasury, the Fed, any more power? Why would you ever allow them to have a digital currency? We should never do that. We don't want them to control more things. Climate change, another way to control you. Unconstitutional at the federal government. EPA should have never been started at the federal level. They could have maybe done it at a state level if one state wanted to do it. Here's the point. You don't give someone who's acting badly, and let's look at some of the debt. This is how bad it is. Let's look at this. Why is this important to you, men? Okay, the U.S. national debt by year updated January 18th, 2023, The Balance, Fiscal Policy. It's from The Balance by Kimberly Amadeo, reviewed by Robert C. Kelly, and fact-checked by Emily Ernsberger. So in this article, you've got, let's just go on down. U.S. debt grew to trillions, over 31 trillion. And let's look at this. Okay, 1929, 17. 1930, 16. 1931, 17. Dust Bowl, drought raged, it says. That was, let's go back. 1930, it was 16 billion. To GDP ratio, 17%. 1929, 17 and 16%. So the Fed's only been around a little bit before they can get going really well. But there's a market crash in 1929 after the Fed is done. Has the Fed done a good job? People could argue that it has not. 1934 was 40% to GDP, 27. 1935, 29. All right, I don't want to go through all this. 1943, wars are not great. 137, 1944, 201, Bretton Woods. 1945, World War II ends. 114% to GDP spending, okay? So they're not doing, anyway, here's the point. It keeps going up. 285, 1959, 286, 1960, 300, 1963. Let's go up to 73, 458. Nixon ends the gold standard. There you go. So another bad thing in the gold standard. 1974, 475. 1975, 533. 1976, 620. Stagflation. So then you get 1982, you hit a trillion, right? For the first time. So from then on, 1.3, it just keeps tremendously going up, right? And then from Bush on, it just tremendously takes off again. So it just keeps going up. So the point is, you don't want to reward these people that are spending poorly. If someone was doing it in your company, you wouldn't send them back. You wouldn't hire them again. You'd fire them. So be careful who you vote for, who you're sending to Congress. Look into it. Talk about it constantly. As men, this is important. Why? How are you going to build a business if we're under socialism? You can't. How are you going to protect your family? You can't. If you're under communism, you can't, or fascism, or whatever it becomes, totalitarianism, you can't protect your family. And if you're really ambitious and you want to work really hard as a man, you can't do it as well. Free markets work well for the ambitious person, work well for someone who's got a brilliant idea and can execute it. And that person can dream, and you can dream for your family. You can wish a better life for your children. So here's the point. We don't want to be giving them any more control and power with a digital currency when they haven't managed well at all. They've shown that they will just spend, thereby creating inflation, making your life harder, making it more difficult for you to save money, which makes it more difficult for you to start a business, right? And we could talk about all kinds of things they're doing at the federal level, which just came out, right? This new mortgage executive action too, as well, which would punish good credit people. Why is the federal government involved in that? Unconstitutional again. So you need to hold them, restore the Constitution, restore free markets. For whom? For yourself, for your freedom. It's really about freedom. Look at the control they tried to have over you. Imagine if you were stuck at home on digital currency in an electric car. And the goal is not to put you in an electric car. The goal is to get you out of cars altogether, I believe, to control you. So here's the point. You don't reward someone who's done poorly with more responsibility, more power, and they have done poorly. So as men, you have to protect it. Freedom is worth standing for. Freedom gives you opportunity. Freedom gives you the opportunity to go build whatever you want to build. Build a business, build a cigar shop, go out with your friends. Freedom. So you want to live in a country where you can build businesses, where you're free to drive where you want to go, and where you have the freedom to think of an idea, build it, and execute it, to dream. That's America that we love. We love the America where you can dream of making a movie, dream of creating, dream of building. So you have to ask yourself, why is the federal government spending so much money? What's the purpose in it? Why are they doing it to you? Why are they constantly increasing the debt? It's not good for you. What's the purpose? Who's it rewarding? Who's it helping? You gotta trace the money. Where's it all going? Who's it helping? Who's becoming affluent from all the government spending? Is it helping small business? Is it helping you? What's it doing to inflation? What's it doing to your budget? What's it doing to the economy? What's the goal? It's what you've got to ask yourselves. Thank you. Forging better, stronger men, groups of men, and better thinkers. If you like these videos, please subscribe, comment, like, and hit the notification button.